So is Alex Sarr the biggest draft bust of all time or what?
Yeah, I mean, he's got to be top 3 ever. Like, if you're looking, it's him, probably Olowokandi. I actually think Kwame turned into like a decent post defender,
Yeah,
so I
I
don't know
mean,
if you
like
can put
Anthony
him in the top
Bennett
3.
carved out a nice career. Will Sarr even last that long? Yeah.
Probably not if you had to bet just based on half of the Wizards fan base's reaction to it. Uh, who cares how he performed? Like, this is one thing we talked a lot about on our show because I have a center on the show who played in summer league, and he talked about how hard that is, to come in as a rookie and just be like, okay, no one's going to pass me the ball. Cool. When I get it, I'm going to do something crazy. And honestly, I think the leash was a little too long, and they just let him get away with like doing some wild shit out there. Honestly, like we don't need Alex Sarr step back threes when he's already 0 for 12 to start a game. Like, that should have never been something that was allowed to happen. So it's as much there to blame as he is, I think. But if he gets stronger and gets a little tougher, and I think if they got a couple like Valanciunas is kind of, there to encourage and mentor him or whatever, at least for part of the season. I don't think they're going to let him get away with like floating to the perimeter as much as he did kind of from day one there. And when you go back, like I went and watched that G League Ignite game, the first one where he was like really good at the beginning of last season. And like, he was not afraid to mix it up, and he was like going to the rim at them and stuff. So like, I think when he gets like kind of catches back up to the level of physicality and competition and things like that, like I'm not too worried about it long term personally. It just
So
they're
what
going to
is?
simplify for him at least.
So you do think they're going to simp because you and Jody had talked a lot about him playing within himself or
Yeah,
whatever you guys were saying.
yeah,
And my question was, do you think that they're actually like sort of built to do that for him?
yeah.
Like they have enough sort of that secondary infrastructure to be, hey, you're going to be more of this play finisher that isn't floating around the perimeter too much. And so focus on connecting on your screens, finishing more physically. You think they're, I guess not even they're built to that, but you think that they will try to wire him to actively do that rather than give him too much of a rope.
I sure hope so. I don't know what they're doing if they don't. Like, if he's got kind of 2 paths to follow in practice, and he can watch 6'10" Kyle Kuzma like ISO on the perimeter, or he can watch Marvin Bagley like try to post somebody up and just finish easy buckets around the rim. Like, I'm hoping he goes more in the Bagley direction early, and then use the downtime and the offseason and things like that to kind of work on the skill set, and slowly kind of add those other things on. I want him to outrun the other centers. I want him to close up a lot of like holes for people defensively, catch a couple lobs here and there if he can, get a couple putbacks. Like, just if he does that, like I think that's a really good rookie year, just considering where he is. And then you wait for the other stuff to come around. Like the short roll passing was really good. If they want to, put him on the elbow and let somebody kind of like run off of him, like I'm cool with something like that. But he should not be like ISO creating at any point in a game, in the NBA. And I definitely don't think they'll let him do any of that like the first half of the year at the very least.
Do you anticipate like Keith trying to play him and Valanciunas together, or was that strictly we want Jonas to show Sarr his shoulder workout?
I think they're going to have to, just where he's at. Like, he was getting muscled by dudes, 3 inches smaller than him at this point. And I think just unless they're just willing to like be so bad in his minutes that like he might be sort of one of the least productive players in the NBA this year that's actually going to get minutes, because I think they will play him, but I would hope that they kind of have enough support around him or realize the kind of support he needs. So whether it's Rashawn Holmes or Bagley or one of these other guys, like I just don't think you can leave him out there as like the lone like real big. Like if it's him next to Kuzma and then whoever Bilal at the 3 or whatever, like they're gonna get just destroyed anywhere around the rim, I think.
Do you think that he can handle that sort of off big role then though? Because it's like if you're playing with Jonas Valanciunas even has some stretch, but like the things we're talking about Alex are doing is avoiding being on the perimeter. It's like I don't know if Jonas Valanciunas is a good enough
Yeah.
floor spacer to then open up the lane for him to do a lot of the stuff, or even just at the elbows, like open that space for him to occupy.
The answer is no, but I don't think you have a choice. Like, I don't think there's enough there for him to do those things, but I also don't think you can leave him alone as the only big on the court. And I think there's more of a chance of him just feet set hitting like wide open corner threes than there are him, controlling the defensive glass alone out there. So to me, it's like, let's pick your poison here. I think he's better off like just stand in a corner, and if you're, open, shoot it, or or drive or slash a little bit more, then I think he could kind of handle, I don't know, even backup centers, alone.
I'm very interested to see what he looks like because I liked his defense more
Yeah,
coming out of school than his offense. I think most people
sure.
were there too. And I'm curious, like, not even just the role they're going to kind of throw him in, but when this team is clearly built not to be so great defensively, do you worry about him picking up bad habits or getting discouraged? Because he is probably going to be shouldering regardless of who he's playing with, regardless of whether he's the only big on the floor, just so much responsibility. And I think we've seen using Jalen Duren in Detroit as an analog, like what can
Mm,
kind of happen when there's like if you don't have guys who can keep the ball in front of them and you're young and you're still learning, it could be disastrous. And so like I really do value Alex Sarr's malleability, and I think he can
yep.
make a bunch of kind of plays even when he's not the primary rim protector. I'm just curious to see if we can come away from this offseason seeing enough of the flickers of that, given like just the rest of the Wizards roster. And I almost would when you just kind of look at how they're built at the moment. Like I might just tie so many of his minutes to Bilal Coulibaly's and maybe
Yeah.
even throwing Malcolm Brogdon, like just as guys who might profile as immediately competent to good
Mhm.
defenders, because I think that makes wherever you're going to have him, but like on the lower lines, it feels like it will make his job easier and we might learn more about what he could do at his absolute peak.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I've worried about every person the Wizards have drafted for the last 25 years picking up bad habits defensively because there's just been a glut of bad, lazy defenders on most of these rosters. So that's like my perpetual fear. But I think that's the nice thing about the guys they're drafting is, or at least the guys they're drafting high, like Coulibaly and Sarr, are rooted, I think, in trying to play the right way and play and actually care about defense. And I think his natural tools and skills will just kind of like prevent him from ever being like a total bum on the defensive side. Like he's just too long and too mobile to not at least be eventually a plus defender, even if there's a couple of bad habits here or there. And then you just have to trust that you can get a good enough coach to kind of, smooth over the rough edges over time. But I'm with you. Like I would be putting him with guys that aren't gonna like totally leave him out to dry a lot and have to like cover up too much for them, and just same kind of thing. Keep the defensive role as simple as it can early, and then hopefully maybe you can kind of scale up over time as you go too.
I've waited long enough. Let's do 2 hours on Bilal Coulibaly.
Perfect.
But actually, so what stood out, impressed you, or surprised you most about what he did as a rookie before his injury?
I thought he was just like not scared to take on like really tough defensive assignments, and there were a couple times it looked really bad in my opinion, and that's maybe not a popular opinion with the rest of the fan base here, but he got cooked a few times but didn't seem at all discouraged by that. And like the thing I liked most about Denny Avdia from day one was the defense. Like I was the skeptic on whether the offense would come around enough to kind of justify the role that you'd want from him in terms of where the defense was. So, but I like the defense from day one. It was just he would get frustrated and you could see it, and the fouling and things like that. Like he couldn't reconcile what was and wasn't allowed or expected of him as like a rookie defender guarding Kawhi Leonard or LeBron or whatever. Coulibaly like seemed kind of like up for the challenge and like a little more like to take a little more joy out of it. And I like the Denny approach of like I'm taking this so seriously, but also like you also kind of have to have fun with it a little bit too, especially as a rookie of just like, cool, look at this moment where I'm gonna go guard Luca. And he might still score 25, but I thought at least he was better defensively right away against the best players than I think you could typically safely expect from a rookie player to be. And honestly, I think he was one of their more impactful defensive players overall. Like just using the Denny analog again, like Denny was a really good player, but I don't think he made the other guys on the court around him better or the overall team defense better. Whereas I saw enough from Coulibaly to think like he can be that kind of guy. Like the length, the recoverability, like all those things, guarding multiple positions like well. I think that's something that like just excited me long term enough that, even if he's gonna get beat a few times on some dumb stuff, like that's okay because it's the sort of still theory of him and what he could turn into.
I'm also wondering if he gets. I totally agree with everything you said. I wonder if he also gets better or is at least more intriguing because he looked. I know fans weren't happy with his role in with France or basically how he played, but he looks like he might have gotten stronger. We are on
Yeah, I think
muscle
so.
watch. It's muscle watch
Yep.
season, so
That's
may,
fair.
maybe I'm drinking too much Kool-Aid there, but he does look stronger, and so that intrigues me even more
Yep.
because he held up so well in a lot of assignments that you were referencing. And it was not that he was weak, but like this didn't look like someone who was built
Yeah.
to cover. So even at his, not his peak, but like even if you took the most optimistic outlook on Bilal Coulibaly, the rookie defender, some of the guys he was going up against,
Yeah,
he just
tanks.
held up. They looked so
Yeah.
much bigger and stronger than
Yeah.
he was. And I'm like, well, if he like put on like real size now, like what does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah, like there was a play last year where like LeBron put like a shoulder into him, and I thought he was gonna like just float away because he was just, like he's just wasn't there yet. Whereas like in the Olympics, like he was fine. He just same kind of thing. Looked up for the challenge, seemed to fit into the scheme pretty well there defensively, and it was a thing that was interesting. Like all last year in the draft, like everybody praised Steph Castle for UConn because like, oh, here's this 5-star recruit that comes in and is just willing to be like this like switchable, malleable team defender. And like, he was willing to kind of take on that role and just be fine with that. And now it's like, well, Coulibaly, like, why is he okay just being like, standing in the corner and just being like a defender? It's like we can't really pick and choose like when that's optimal. He's a 20-year-old playing minutes on an Olympic team, and he held up reasonably well. It's like, well, I wish he would have had a few more like ISO plays for himself. Like I don't care about any of that stuff personally. So I thought he was great.
Looking at his role with the Wizards, though, do you think they're going to attempt at all this year to expand his
I hope so.
offensive uses, even if it's a matter of now, if it's me, I'm just going to put the ball in his hands and be like, all right,
Yeah,
let's really see what this does. But even
sure.
more is, I thought what he did well, and I wouldn't call it a strength of his game, but like there's a lot of plays where it's like if he was a screener or if he just
Mhm.
caught the ball in the center of the floor, I thought he had really good vision and like decision making in those scenarios. And it's like, I would like to see more of that then. I know they have so many bigs that maybe they don't view him in that way, but it's like, I'm at the point where the Wizards, I would call it hashtag just try shit. And
Yep.
so but do they have the, not it's they have the timeline, but when you're looking at the personnel, like are they going to have the flexibility to experiment more with Bilal?
I think you'll see more of it. I wonder if that's partly what some of the willingness to trade Denny was, is just free up minutes there to do those kinds of things. And also, I think the Denny move, you're only going to be so good if you trade away the guy who was probably your best player last year, at least arguably one of your two best players. So, but the other part of that, though, I think is free up a few more secondary creator touches for Coulibaly and see if he can do some of that stuff. And maybe you can run a little bit more and let him be like more of a transition finisher and just see like all the different stuff he may or may not be good at. And that also kind of helps you assess going into next season the other things you want him to work on. Like I think the one thing about like the Olympics is all the overall benefit, it's still a plus, but he didn't get as much dedicated, just like be in a gym with a trainer working on tightening his handle kind of time so far. And he's got until now, until the start of the season to do that. But like next season, I think is going to be maybe the biggest season for him skill development wise in his whole career. So it's just use this year to figure out like where the holes still are. And then you can also kind of measure progress from last year. Like I'm assuming even in practices and things like that, he probably got to do a few more things. So they'll know even anecdotally, like, okay, he looks more comfortable handling or initiating in the pick and roll or being the roller or just, for the try shit out kind of approach. Like I think you can kind of try a few more things out. And especially in the second half of the year, I don't, between Brogdon, Valanciunas, and Kuzma, I would imagine two of the three of them are not on the roster after the deadline. So that's a lot less touches and that's more that can go to him. So I'm hopeful that they'll kind of scale up over the year too.
So maybe he'll get that like mid-season Denny bump that we
Right,
saw
exactly.
last year.
That's
That's what
exactly what I'm expecting. Yeah.